I guess I should start with, well, Inga, right? You asked the question. So who am I and what the heck brings me here? So yeah, Matt Cuccaro. I'm now based and I've been 20 years in Hilton Head, South Carolina. Um, Extremely blessed to be here. Been married 12 years. My wife, we have a 10-year-old son. And they round me out and they ground me and they challenge me and do all the things that I think great leaders and great families should do with and for each other. Um, Adam Naylor, I'm sure his name will obviously come up a great deal. He was a tremendous mentor and he was my co-creator of the app. At first I was like, oh, I'm going to do this on my own. And then I realized, nah, I don't have the depth. I'm going to need a little help here. I need the nudge and I need the support. And we'll talk through kind of one of the core key pillars that we discuss is based around that as well. Um, so that's my more kind of recent history, but kind of going back, I grew up in New Jersey in a little beach town. So Joe, you might think of me as this golf nerd, but believe it or not, I grew up a surfer. I grew up in the ocean, and kind of like reading the water and doing all that fun stuff, and just being in nature um, and while I certainly did grow up in a privileged area, I'll be the first to admit that. But I was always the worker, right? I was the caddy, so that's actually how I get into golf. Was kind of more being the servant kind of leader, and I still love to play that role. I think our job done well, at least what I do done well, it's actually being in the background and being that support, and maybe nudging and tapping the wheel here or there. But I think that really kind of grounded and shaped my philosophy. It was just kind of how I grew up. My mom was a teacher. My dad was in kind of social science and then into business himself. So I think I just also had some amazing frameworks growing up as a young kid. Um, my school, so also my kindergarten through eighth grade, we had 16 kids in my class. And we were the biggest class the school ever had. The class behind us was four. And this was a public school, by the way. Right. So it was like, oh, Matt, you can dribble a basketball. All right, you're going to be the point guard. You can sing. I kind of heard you like singing one time. You're going to be the lead in the school play. And hey, we got this Christmas show coming up. You want to try trumpet? We need a soloist for that. So it was amazing of just from a young age, I was just taught to throw myself into stuff and just try things on. And there wasn't a lot of shaming and blaming around screwing up. It was just, this is how we learn. This is what we do. And I think that was really helped shape who I've become as well. Um, so then, sport and school and social are all important. I'm actually an only child. So I also grew up, I think, being an observer and a thinker. But had a bunch of cousins, right? So always people around and was always in sports teams and had people around and learned to kind of navigate social situations. And so kind of had that as a framework. I think that's helped me become who I am today. So I played baseball was my main sport, but I got injured as a pitcher, and then I turned to golf. And Joe, as much as we poke fun at it all, it's honestly been the best blessing for me because it's such also a cerebral sport, right? I mean, you have to sit there and the ball sits still, and you're with yourself, and you have to deal with all the emotions and the uncertainties and the social pressures, and it really also I think really helped kind of frame who I've become. So um, uh, thankfully, I get injured early enough in baseball. I got to be good enough to play in golf in college. Um, so I did my undergraduate at Loyola, Maryland, and I actually was a marketing major. So my undergrad was in business, kind of like the human side of business. So studied there. Had a very short and very unsuccessful professional playing career. I didn't have the game and didn't have the funding, but glad I did it. And then I worked for this company called the American Junior Golf Association. So I ran junior golf tournaments all over the country. Um, we led interns, right? So as a young man, I was also taught to be a leader and what that means and the responsibilities and travel and how to adapt and how to plan a little bit. Um, so again, just the opportunities I had and the trust that people put in me had always been inspiring to me. So then I guess the final peg that kind of really got me into the human performance side, when I was with the American Junior Golf Association, I was named the captain of this national junior team. So that meant I was the captain of the top 10 boys and girls from East in the US, and we played the West in the US. So all these players are now, or I shouldn't say all, but most are now on either the PGA Tour or the LPGA Tour. they have gone on to be the best of the best in the world. And I just had this growing curiosity, like, what is it? What makes them the top 3% in the world? So I went back to graduate school, and thankfully, this is where I found Adam Naylor. Again, blessing, right? It just we are such a nature of the people we find and the people we surround ourselves with, and I'm even more intentional about that, kind of understanding the power of that, which is why I appreciate this group. So thank you again for having me. Um, and Adam and I just, I don't know, I guess he saw my geekiness and my nerdiness and my interest and curiosity, and was always asking Adam, even today, I'm like, hey, what should I be reading? What do it's not about, Adam, what can you do for me? It's always, what can I learn? Where do I need to be going? Where do I need to be digging in? And so, we've created this tremendous friendship and partnership, um, along with Joe Spano. So Joe is also a former colleague of a few of us on this call. So then Joe has created the technology behind our Telos Golf app. So okay, so next phase of my life, back up one more time. After graduate school, there was a junior golf and tennis academy here in Hilton Head. They named me the director of the mental performance side there. So for a decade, I basically had my own lab, right? And I got to see and uncover different coaching styles. And I watched, right, if we had 120, 130 athletes a year, and some would train in the morning, some in the afternoon. So it was nice. The groups were broken up. There were about 8 to 12 coaches in any given year between the two sports. And to really watch the dynamics of these groups evolve over a 9 to 10 month period each year was just fascinating to me. So we kind of integrated under Adam, because I knew what I didn't know. I was first to admit, like, Adam, I'm going to need help at this academy. And I brought him to advise me, to continue after grad school to be my advisor through that process as well. So we then started actually integrating a lot of the app, without me even knowing it at the time. We were integrating this stuff in at the academy. So, did that for a decade. I've actually been to 3 masters tournaments now with a kid who was in high school at the time, who's now playing on that big stage and doing all that fun stuff. And thankfully, he still invites me in just as the sidecar to hang out and watch. It's like, hey man, you do your thing. I'm going to be back here, and I love it that way. Um, and yeah, now the last decade of my life post academy has been creating the app. This has been 8 years in the making. As well as, yeah, I've been fortunate to work with Deloitte and some college teams, and some individuals, and some corporate stuff too. So that's my history.
Yes, you just mentioned. I just remember from our conversation this dynamic. What you also witness, besides one-on-one, what we do developing of the talent, and then how to perform in biggest stages and under biggest pressures, but also your expertise in team and environment dynamics, which is super unique, but it's so impactful to consider how that to create the culture of the environment. Before going into that team dynamics and culture, can you maybe let us know about I really like how you present the 4 pillars of the chair um, uh, legs, what they need to be connected
Yeah. So
to.
so Inga, maybe I'll. So I think first maybe I'll back up, and I think there's 4 integral theories or philosophies, researchers who we integrate into the app, and then maybe I'll
Yeah.
screen share, and that way I can kind of be the backdrop, right, for a bit of the discussion. Um, but essentially, I think what's integral to understand is that we are emotional beings with the ability to rationalize. Okay, we're not rational with emotion. We are emotional with the ability to rationalize. So that's the work of Antonio Damasio, right? And him understanding that the brain and has these somatic responses that either draw us into things, right? So I welcome this, I want more of this, I am going to lean into this thing, or oh no, this isn't good. And before we can even have words or an understanding for it, these somatic markers, right, our heart rates and our sweat and all these things are already sending us messages before we even know they're happening. So essentially, our emotion is what guides us, right? And be high performing humans if we did not have that emotion. There's actually, right, the work around people who lose part of their prefrontal lobe and they cannot decision make. It's really, if just dealing with facts, how would we ever drive a car? How do you know how far and how close? And it's all based on our feel and our sense. How do we know what restaurant to go to or what we're going to order? These aren't just factual ideas, right? These are sensations, these are feelings, these are all these things that actually guide us, right? So I think first and foremost to understand that we are emotional beings with the ability to rationalize. um, Joe, coming into this call, right, you talked about the Daniel Kahneman thinking fast and slow, right? So understanding, and this kind of goes into what Kahneman talked about, system one, system two. So system one is trusting in that emotion and simply following along with it. And I think in athletics, this is really important when it's time to perform, right? Just get out of your head and get into your eyes. Focus on your targets. Use your emotion towards your targets. I think as a leader, this means using our eyes and connecting with others. Get out of your head, get out of the crap going on inside yourself and just be with the people you're with. Get out. Right? So this is kind of that system one. Then the system two is the pausing and the slowing down, right? And appreciating that sometimes my emotions misguide me too. So they're nice awareness pieces, right? But we really need to prime them and understand them to be a high performing athlete by instinct or performer or leader by instinct. So we should also therefore pause and reflect. And this is like such an important part, right? Then there's the self-efficacy work, right? So this is layered clearly through the app, right? Of what confidence actually is from the research. So we'll talk through that as we go. And self-determination theory. It's the predominant theory of motivation. Again, we are emotional beings. So understanding that our motives, right, is actually our emotion, and understanding kind of the three key parts of that drive that, and what, yes, intrinsic, right? If we have a really deep intrinsic motivation, meaning I do this for this, it satisfies me to simply be here sitting with all of you today. I'm not being paid to do this. I just genuinely want to be here. This is interesting to me. I'm curious. This is appropriately challenging. I enjoy the people here. Right? This gets me going. It gets my heart rate going. It gets me sweating a little bit. I genuinely love this. Right? This is intrinsic motivation. This is a really deep, sustainable drive. Versus, Inga, you need to pay me $200 to come here and talk, and I'll give you my C plus show. Here we go. Right? That's this more transactional, extrinsic type drive, right? And that doesn't kind of work, right? So I think just understanding all of these components are layered into the app. So Inga, maybe I can share. Is it fair if I share
You should be able
my
to. Can you?
screen here? It looks like I can. Can everybody
Yes.
see?
Yes.
Okay, so essentially this is kind of one of the screens in the app. So as you see, we kind of have these four frameworks, right? These four pillars. And I think these are kind of our guiding principles through the app. And then as you go, it pops up and spits out for you different options. So within each of these, so it continues to layer upon each other, right? So this Roots of a Great Mental Game is actually a be ready exercise. And there's games, there's drills, there's articles. You put in your reflections. And if you see here on the top left, there's like this menu bars, these three bars, and that ends up dropping down. And there's an assessment when you come into it, so it kind of assesses each of these four pillars for you. Again, this is a golf app, so there's post-round reflections, and it makes you reflect upon: did I live out what I would call, these are our values, right? And did we live out these values while we competed? And then it creates a journal, right? So when you answer your questions, it filters into a journal that you have access to through this. So that's kind of the parts of the app. And then I think the grounding mechanisms here are our four key pillars. So embracing challenge, right? And this is deeply rooted in that intrinsic motivation, right? Of having something that's appropriately challenging. This is focus. This is flow. This is the zone, right? We need to sit with something meaningfully challenging to draw us in. Flow and focus and all those things do not happen sitting on the beach, lounging in a beach chair. That's nice, but that's not an engaging flow state, right? We do not perform at a high level if we simply exist in that state. So, this idea of embracing challenge, it just means engaging with appropriate level things. In a golf sense, we would say it's like a 5-foot putt. It's that thing that kind of gets our heart rate going. It seems like it would be really easy to do, but it's actually probably the hardest shot in golf because our ego is on the line. Right?
Mm.
So this idea of embracing challenge, right? We're not talking about big, hairy, dumb, stupid things. We're talking about meaningful, appropriately challenging, maybe like 60-40, 70-30 success to failure rate that you sit with and engage with that bring us focus. And actually, this is also where our confidence, right? This is the self-efficacy work. Our confidence comes not from outcomes, but knowing we can navigate challenges effectively and appropriately. That idea scales, right? Whether it's sport or business, right? Knowing that we can navigate these moments is actually the part that helps us grow and develop over here, over here, over here, over here. So that's essentially the embrace challenge lever pillar that we talked through. The letting go, right? So this might be the other side of it. This is um, can we give up control, which is so hard as a human. And I think what I find is when I'm working with younger athletes, especially, and honestly, this is my senior folks with Deloitte as well. We start with embracing challenge. That's the first, I think, important part to understand. But you can't finish unless you know how to let go. We can only grip on so tight and try so hard. The word grit, I love the idea and the theory behind it. I hate what it's called. The other piece of this letting go, right? So I'm 50, right? So Michael Jordan was like the prototypical athlete when I grew up. And does anyone remember what was Michael Jordan's mouth doing when he was competing at the highest level in the most critical moments of a game? What do you remember about his mouth?
The tongue?
Yep,
Yes, it's coming out.
right? Talk about letting go, right? He was not holding on tight and death gripping anything. He was, again, like this was this system one. He was trusting in his skills. He was getting into his eyes and getting out. He was simply just letting go and performing, and c'est la vie. What happens, happens. Right? We talk about in our golf app of, right, to be willing to miss is kind of a proactive version of this acceptance. Um, Let me throw out another question. I think this is a fun one that kind of bridges a bit of the embrace challenge and let go. And maybe in the chat, I'd like people to answer this and maybe rank these for me 1 through 4. Okay, so I'm going to give you 4 scenarios. And Simus, this will be a tennis one. Let me drop a tennis one on you because I actually have a great tennis story that this layers into. So, from a tennis perspective, I'm going to give you 4 examples and I want everyone to rank these 1 through 4. Okay, so option A, you hit a nice big serve. You catch your opponent off guard. They just kind of block it back in play. So a short ball comes. Inga, the short ball comes. You're salivating all over it, right? So you run in, which is exactly what you should do. You do catch it in your strike zone, though, Inga. You're a little bit patient. You wait and you catch it right in your strike zone. And you hit it nice and deep into the court. It's an appropriate risk. Okay, you're not taking a dumb risk here. It's an appropriate risk. You come in, your target is about 2 feet inside the baseline. You put the ball away and you win the point. Okay, so this is kind of that approach motivation style, right? You nice big serve, you're playing out your game plan, you're living out your
Dream
values,
scenario.
you finish it off. Okay, that's A. B, nice big serve, short ball comes, you dink it in. You're just like, oh God, I need to win this point. I need to win this point. It's match point. Please, please, please win this point. You just dink it, and then your opponent blows it even worse and hits it in the net. You win the point. That's B. C, nice big serve, short ball comes, the same approach as A. Okay, you're nice and assertive, you're coming in, you're living out your values, you pick your target, you swing away, but oh gosh, you miss it 6 inches long. You lose the point. That's C. D is the same as B. You go passive, right? So nice big serve, short ball comes, you dink it, but this time you dink it, and because you're not using speed and spin, and the ball just flies out of the court and you miss it 6 inches long. In the chat, please, rank for me. How would you prioritize these? What order do they come in? So A is the assertive, you win the point. B, passive, you win the point. C, assertive, you lose the point. D, passive, you lose the point. So A and B, you win. C and D, you lose.
What do you mean in the ranking?
So
Uh,
from your favorite to your least
oh,
favorite. Right?
favorite.
Yeah, from your favorite to your least favorite. What's your preference?
How do I want to
So
lose?
Montes A, C, B, D. Okay. Okay, so I think everybody's kind of in the same, right? So, which I love. Here's a little nuance to this, by the way. I have one female tennis athlete. She is 5'0". Okay, you look at this girl, and I mean, she's a brick though. She's strong, but she's not a physically tall, intimidating athlete. She was an All-American at the University of Georgia for 3 straight years. She ranked them A, C, right, as most of you did. Then she goes D, and she puts B last. So remember, B is the one where you win the point in a passive way last. She goes, Matt, can I curse Inga on this? Just to
For
use her
sure.
language.
For
She goes,
sure.
Matt. She goes, Matt, I don't want to get away with that shit. She goes, I want to get pegged by the ball if I am not playing my style of tennis. I do not want to win that point. I want to get reminded, no, that is not how you play. Go back to the baseline and do it again. I think a little extreme, but I love this. This is this values based, right? This is that I'm going to embrace a challenge. I'm going to let go. I'm going to prioritize all of these things over an outcome. This is essentially what we're trying to coach in sport and in business, right? So this is what's called approach motivation, right? Meaning I'm going to go for my stuff and not in a reckless, crazy, stupid way. I'm going to take appropriate risk. I'm going to take the things I've learned over the years and I'm going to try them. Right? So, Simas, I'm going to ask you too. We have your student right here. How is Inga at trying new things in a match? Right. So this is hard, right? In sport, you work on your lessons. They're not quite comfortable yet. We probably haven't fully integrated them into our game yet. Would you encourage her to try those and use those things in a match? What's your take on that?
She's trying with the big stress.
Okay.
Yeah, and she's trying uh, very. Sometimes it's very hard with the big emotions, or
Yeah.
because it depends of a drill, and
Yeah.
sometimes with the big
Yeah.
save, not
Okay.
sure. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like a lot of players.
And this is what we do, and I think we don't live all in one or the other, but I think it's this idea of hopefully we nudge ourselves towards the go for it. I kind of I'm going to learn. Worst case scenario, I'm going to learn. It's going to hurt my ego a little bit, but I'm going to learn. um so that's a biggie, and we'll get to maybe the compete with, and I think this is also big, the environment. The compete with, the last one has to do with the environment, which also I think dictates how courageous we are or are not. um so we'll kind of get to that one. But in business, right, I think this is also the letting go is such an important part, meaning like we give others autonomy, right? As a leader, we can't just control everything and do everything for ourselves and the way we want it done. We have to be willing to give up that control and let others grow their confidence, and us as leaders to show them as well that I trust in you. I want you to go for it, right? And back to this will be part of the compete with thing, right? But and that I will support you through it. So, right, that's I think just also a big part of our leadership. So, um, then the be ready. I think this is the stuff you'd normally hear in your performance psychology work, right? Of hey, use your breath to settle your body. Really helpful, really useful. But honestly, if we own the other three pillars, you don't need to self regulate as much. right? If my goals and I'm living out my values of I'm going to take appropriate challenge, I'm going to let go, I'm going to enjoy the camaraderie and the company, I'm going to be social, I'm going to learn with and from others. We don't actually need the mental skills stuff as much because we have this deeper emotional resonance, right back to the Damasio stuff, right? We've actually almost trained our emotion in a different way to drive us more succinctly and fluidly without having to self-regulate as much, right? So it's interesting of how much our motivations really dictate how much we have to self-regulate. And this is where athletes, right, have a hard time either at the beginning or the end. When we're so close to our goal, we get distracted, uh, and honestly, things start like taking on a different form. But if we get back to intrinsic, right, and welcome the challenge and let go and have a deeper presence, right? I'm not a rah rah rah. Let's be positive guy. Our negative emotion actually helps us too. But let's take whatever we're experiencing and pour it into our targets, and then we're good. I think is such that important part of the be ready and the letting go part. So, right, so settling our body, and then maybe having a routine. Like in golf, this drives me nuts. That coaches, right? It's like, oh, we got to practice your pre-shot routine, and similar in tennis. Of like, you gotta take 3 practice swings, and you have to leave your target 5 times. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with the shot you're about to hit. That's your routine is now actually becoming a distraction from the game. How about let's just settle our body and get into our targets? That's
Can you
all.
can you talk a little bit what do you mean by target?
Yeah. So like in golf again, right? To me, it's a start line. Okay, so I have to start the ball somewhere before I can get it to finish somewhere. So that is, right, I'm going to take whether it's the pressure I feel or the joy I feel or the fear I feel, whatever it is, I'm going to take that emotion and I'm going to channel it into my start line and welcome it, and it's actually going to elevate my game. Right? That's what the science would say, right? And it's real. It works this way. And again, I think as a leader, this means being present with the people we're with, right? This is the um, maybe as I layer into the compete with, right, to really understand that all we actually want as humans is to be with other humans, right? We are social animals, and we learn from each other. We support each other. We are there for each other, right? When we start to see others, especially our competition, when we see them as not as adversaries and not as the enemy, but when we actually see them as our teacher, our elevator of our game, right? I think we understand in sport, we play our best when we're with other great performers. It actually helps us focus. We're actually more distracted when someone else is playing terrible, and like we have to then create the power and the energy in the room, right? And whatever, like, no, we are way better off, right? We're Olympians in the room. Why do world records get broken? Because at the Olympics, people are supported and they push each other to do things together that no one could do alone. And the research is so clear about that. We are inspired and motivated, right, by others. And we have these, again, business. This is the biggest thing I strongly encourage of the second strongest way of our confidence. So the strongest way is the embrace challenge, right? To what's called mastery experience, to do things for ourselves and to know we can navigate hard things and feel secure in ourselves that we can sit in those moments. That's the mastery experience. That's the embrace challenge. The second strongest and third strongest come from the compete with. So the second strongest is seeing others like us do things. And it's not that we're watching them get an outcome, we're watching their process. Right. So, hey, Inga, I see how you're serving. Like, I'm watching you kind of use the ground and get up and elevate. And I'm watching how you do commit to your targets. And I'm seeing you really are using speed and spin to get the ball in the court. I'm a human just like you, right? I think having the science would say the closer the model is to us, as far as that we can relate to them, that matters, right? So this is where I love at the junior academies of we're getting these people together who look and perform similarly, right? They're about the same age, same skill level, and that's a beautiful thing. They can learn so much with each other. right? So kind of being inspired and learning from others is the second strongest way of our confidence. The third strongest way is the support part, which I hope all of us on this call as coaches, I would hope that our students know first and foremost, I am here to support you. You are safe here. You are loved here. You are appreciated here. Okay, now do cool stuff and I'm going to support you too. That's I think that's the third strongest way of our confidence. And then the fourth strongest goes back to the be ready, right? Hey, I know how to settle my body. I know how to use my breath. But again, I think if we have these first three of embracing challenge, knowing how to let go, appreciating how important social impact is on us for our motivation, our learning, our mental health, our support, that you don't need that self-regulatory breath as much. You don't need that routine as much. So essentially, yeah, like the app, right, is built around these four ideas, and it gives you games, drills, activities. You play around, you learn. I hope you grow. It levels up with you, and it's kind of a choose your own adventure. So you get to kind of pick and choose your stuff. So yeah, we're starting with golf, and then I don't know, Simus. Maybe I'm coming to you. Tennis might be next. Here we go. So yeah, this is the whole idea of like a great business. We hope we hope it works. We hope people engage with it, and then the hope is it can scale with us too.
Joe is also pointing into the paddles.
Yeah, if you read any of Inga's and Joe's stuff, I guarantee you, right? These threads are in everything they talk about, and it's because it's what the science says. There's no bro science here. There is no made up feel good stuff. This is all evidence based research.
Matt, I think that the compete with is, it feels like today, like it almost comes across as counterintuitive in sport and in business. Like I think that, there's this, I think we're sort of getting so much noise from so many directions and like all the little bells and whistles that you need to perform well, that it just makes it feel like, you kind of have to win at the expense of someone else losing, right? And I think this happens in sport and business. One of the books I'm reading right now is The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley, which really just is sort of a relook at world history. Like even when we convince ourselves that we're sort of doing something on our own, it is so far from the truth. Like,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it just seems like you're doing something like, oh, I'm out in the wilderness, I mean, it just debunks, all these like solo missions, like, you sort of get into, the equipment that gets used, the coaching and all this. And
Yeah.
it's like, basically, the chapter I'm on now is about sort of the formations of cities and really trade, of trade and exchange. And it's like, it's really got me thinking in leadership and in sport.
Yeah.
What is the
So,
trade-off that we're making, to essentially connect with another human? What is it that we're leveraging from someone else to perform a little bit better on our own, even in what appears to be a very solo activity?
so two things around that, Joe, and I love that framing. Right. So let in the chat briefly. Can everyone please define what they think the word compete? What does that word mean? What does it mean to compete? This is in the app actually, right? We go to the Latin root, but I'm interested to hear, right? What do people, because Joe, you're right. I think these words get bastardized and changed, and I'm interested to hear what people. So we can get to excel. Elevate personal performance on your own terms, values, express yourself, beautiful, act in unison. Okay, very cool. The root of the word, to strive together. How cool is that? Right, so competere is, if you break down the word, right? Competere in Latin, apparently, right? It means to strive together. That's what competition is. Why is it all about the winning and the losing and where am I on the scoreboard and all that kind of stuff? That is not the case at all. So I think the ultimate sport example of this, we all know the Roger Bannister story, right? Of how once he broke the 4-minute mile, a bunch of others did. But has anyone seen the video of how Bannister broke the record himself? I love showing this video to my leaders. He goes out, okay? It's actually a race. It's somewhat of a staged race, but there's another university there, plus 3 of his other teammates. His teammates take off and take the wind, and he's riding behind, right? So the first guy takes off, booking it, and Bannister's just riding behind him, holding the wind, right? Just trying to hang on to this guy's toes or his heels. That guy burns out, falls to the side. The next guy jumps in and takes the wind and takes over and goes for another quarter mile. He fades. The final guy jumps out for the next quarter mile and again takes the wind, just inspires Bannister to keep going and keep going. Finally, he drops off, and now this is where Bannister's training and long legs and dynamic sport body just takes over. This is how the 4-minute mile was broken. It was not an individual endeavor. It was not just him. It was a very social experience that created this world record being broken. And again, to your point, Joe, I think we just think of the individuals, and this is just how, as the human mind, it's very easy to go binary, right? Again, good, bad, me, you, versus the space between, Joe, right? This is the idea of how we really kind of talk about this idea of trying to get rid of the yes, no, good, bad, and get more into experiences and having a deeper language and understanding and appreciation for experience and just makes things so much more flowy and beautiful, and we're more present, and therefore our best skills come out.
That's true. Competition would not exist if there would be no people. You're alone against yourself, yes, but I mean, you get stuck with the same level. I am also would love to hear if our listeners, Simas, Mantas, Gediminas, or Joel, do you have any questions for Mantas? Because I get this opportunity to meet Matt because I have many questions, but I want to give a floor to since Simas is here. So do you have any questions or some curiosities about those 4 pillars?
Yes, it's I don't know. It's a great idea with that apps about emotions and about everything what we heard at this moment. It's a question. It's I don't know. It's need to play with that apps. I
Need to
think
percolate. Yeah, no, and happy to
need
get
to
it to you.
use.
Yeah.
Yeah, need to use and it need to watch how it works. It's very interesting. And I think it's very good idea. In tennis, it's too, especially with the kids, with the growing ups and adults too. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. Well, for sure. And essentially, right, like these, and maybe this is a framing for us on the call today, right? Of these essentially become goals, right? And this is where when you come into the app, it assesses on these 4 pillars, right? So it defines where are you strong, where are your deficits around these things. So maybe just today, if you think about your own experiences and maybe try and identify, which one of these pillars do I want to leverage and lean into a little bit more, and what might that look like? And I think I hope as coaches, right, we're constantly asking our folks of, okay, now, set the goal, but again, it's not just an outcome goal. What does this look like in action? Because that's
Yes,
the
yeah.
success, right? Can we live up to this value, right? This value that we have set for ourselves. I think of these pillars as values as well. I mean, when I put my head on the pillow at night, I mean, I really embody this stuff, right? I assess myself around, did I embrace the challenge today? How well did I let go? Was I appropriately settled in the key moments? What was I striving with others, or was I letting my ego take over and needed it to be all about me and my pleasure? So I try and assess myself around these things. And I think there's a really nice guideposts.
Yeah, I think to sort of reflect from the business side, when we had that example in the beginning, the ranking exercise with and the whole thing, with the example you gave, of somebody putting the D before the B, sort of as to not to encourage this kind of behavior. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
when it comes to business context, I think it is actually a seldom developed skill that you have such a clear understanding of what your values are, that you are not valuing it by outcome, because in business frequently, one of the value in any case is the outcome.
sure. Yeah. The problem becomes, right, if we put the outcome first, that's where we stumble, right? That's where we lose our presence. That's where our emotional instability starts coming through. So what's interesting, right? And again, the idea of grit, it's not gritting our teeth and going like this. It's actually showing up with these four values more consistently than the person next to you or than the company next to you.
Mm.
And having that shared belief and understanding that time is a gift, right? I think this is also something where just our short-sighted humanness forgets about, right? With grit, again, I think we think of, I asked someone earlier to define grit for me, and they said, oh, it's like being dirty and all that stuff. I'm like, well, yes, and that's a short-sighted here and now picture.
Mm.
Give me a video, give me a 10-year extrapolation of grit. What would that actually look like? And I think that comes back to the Michael Jordan video, right? Or Joe, like you were talking about, of the Steph Curry. Right? It's the years of development that we have not seen, right? We see the behaviors, we see the here and now finished product, but we do not see the developmental arc of that human and what their beliefs were. And I think the media seems to be getting better.
Mm.
And I think asking better questions around this stuff in some places. I still see the media, right? I think, and I honestly don't watch much golf because it in a lot of ways it does drive me nuts. Like the announcers and the drama casting, right, and the outcome forecasting and all that kind of stuff. I think just misguides people, which honestly probably makes my job easier, right, and it keeps people coming to me, which is kind of nice too. But I think the interviews, I think, are becoming better. I think are becoming more succinct. I think there's a little more humanness coming out of interviews that I think in the business world, I hope we can leverage and layer into with our people as well.
That's a
Yeah, I
just,
think, I think to comment on this, it is inevitably a journey, right? And I think sort of the challenge in the business context from which I myself come in any case is that there's a lot of, by definition, I guess there's a lot of people who are self-built,
Yeah.
probably
Yep.
in any area of life as well. So I know this one, and this one definitely a lot of people who are self-built, and then some of them actually go through some sort of formal education sooner or later.
Yep.
But this it's, I think it probably takes some stumbling around, and
course.
falling over before you understand that you cannot chase the impression, the shallow caricature of what a leader looks like, because I think I myself, when I started, I can tell you, fairly that when I started, I was trying to be I was trying to look like a leader. I didn't know how to be one.
Yeah, sure.
And
Yeah.
that was, I was a shit leader. I was a shit manager, and it was really hard work for me to do so as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And by the way, like it's not that you can't get the outcomes by being an outcome drive. It's just not going to be nearly as satisfying. And it's going to take a whole lot of self-regulation if you're going to do it that way. So I'm not saying you can't do it that way. In fact, Michael Jordan, right? So he knew, I think, how to use, if you listen to his interviews and the Last Dance, right, I think is the documentary that he was in. And he, I think, understood this idea of, we're not a switch, we're a dial, right? So you look at those moments with the mouth hanging out, right, or the tongue hanging out, and the letting go in the clutch moments. But I think what he also knew was there's also moments when I'm too low, when I'm not inspired, and maybe I actually need an outcome to dial me up, right? He would actually pick someone in the crowd. He would actually go ego intentionally, right? So in the NBA, they play 100 and however many games, and if you're an all-star like he is, you're probably largely uninspired for many of the mid-season games, especially against a lesser opponent. But he still loved the game, right? So he would be finding these ways to, like, okay, that guy's talking smack about me. I got to show him. So he would pull in some of this ego outcome stuff to intentionally dial himself up, but he knew that's why he was doing it, right? It wasn't just a behavioral thing or a misguided goal. I don't say. I think it was actually really intentional, self-regulatory uh, um, procedure, right, that he used. So again, I would never tell an athlete that all outcome is bad. I think there's a time and a place. In fact, in training, again, maybe somewhat other uninspired in training for an athlete, we might actually go. I have a couple golfers, right, and they do what they call their completion drills, right? So that they intentionally they face up to this outcome that they really desire and want, but they know they're doing it with this intentionality. It's for the enhanced focus and for that stress that they need to become better at their task. But they also know, okay, I don't want to use that when it's game time. Right? I want to give myself space. I think great coaches in sport, and I think great leaders too, right, understand the time and space rule, right? So if we, in the off season, or let's say you're a tax professional, right? So a bunch of my Deloitte folks, right, they're tax professionals. And so when it's outside of tax season, it's easy to just get lethargic. Right? It's easy to just kind of cruise because, again, as humans, right, we push things down the road, and it's way easier to do that. So we might intentionally add some stress and be clear with the team, right? So I'm not playing games with my people, right? But I'm going to be clear that, hey guys, we know this season is slow, so we're going to intentionally crank this up and make the training a little more intense. It's going to make us that much more prepared for game time when it's tax season. We're going to have that much more elevated skill. So then actually come tax season, maybe we can be a little more like Jordan and our tongue can be out and we can spend a little time with our families, God forbid. Right? So I think it's amazing when we understand the goal orientation work and how we can use it like a dial. I think you're talking about, you're taking this emotion, again, and in a business sense, you're pouring it back to your target. Right? So I don't want you to breathe that away. I don't want you to diminish that or get rid of it or push it in a corner or try to fast forward through it. I think these are the mistakes we make as humans. Beauty of it. I think this is that compete with dance as well. And it's beautiful of how when we do support and challenge, we collectively rise and focus each other and help each other.
I think it will make me pay attention to others as they enter this organization behind me, right? To have that kind of empathy, right?
And there's that peer modeling part too. And I think this is, as leaders, I think we do this wonderfully as kids. Right? As this is how we learn to walk. This is how we learn to do things, right? You sit back and you watch. But for some reason, we become adults and our egos take over, and we're way too smart for that now. Come on. There's so many people with way far more advanced, at least parts of skills that we don't own, right? Or parts of life that we don't own, right? So you have all these models out there. Use them.
Joel, so thank you so much for sharing your journey, and Matt reminding also how we can use those little bit of challenge and fear emotions into propel us to the next levels. Gediminas, do you have any reflections or questions from what you heard today?
Just arrived.
Welcome.
Good timing, yeah. It was actually very refreshing. A lot of really good insights. I especially loved that compete part, which we should not forget in any sports or business activity that we do. Compete with, and the meaning of the word compete. And that's one big takeaway that I'm going to have from this session. On the be ready part, I think I would have to revisit. Wasn't still sure about that. What was meant by this pillar? Maybe it coincided with me entering the city and paying more attention to driving rather than listening to this pillar. But in any case, I would like to thank our coach. And I'm really happy that I could experience this session and be with you guys.
Definitely, thank you to Matt and Andrew. I know you just joined for a few seconds. It's so nice to
Yeah,
see, even
I'm
see
so
say
sorry I'm
hi to you.
late. Of course. But if I can just add some thoughts
Yes.
while Joel was speaking, I was relating back to what he was saying about, having to educate and qualify. But I do wonder, and of course with this work, Inga, with you and Joe and Montes and Bahar too, in a physical sporting event, every time we have to requalify. And so I do wonder about the opportunity here that, in understanding this qualification process, how are we continually refining and recalibrating to the audience that we're going after? And so I really appreciate, again, coming back to the work that Inga, you and the team are doing. And of course, Matt, I apologize I'm late. I look forward to getting the recording. But really at the heart of it is the ongoing aspect of like, hey, we really need to be um, ensuring that our audience really knows what we do. And we're only as good as our last project. So I'll just stop there. Thank you.
And I would argue as well, right? It's the knowing what our client wants, and truly listening and delivering, right? I think this is also that empathy part, right? And back to the be ready, right? So maybe to rewind onto that one too, right? So be ready in sport essentially means we know how to settle our body and we know how to use our eyes, right? We know how to get out to our target. So I think of this one in business, it's that human connection part, right? How do we really use our eyes? How do we use our ears and listen and get out of our own heads and out of our own stuff and our own stories and sales points? And how do we understand what the customer, right, or our fellow worker or whoever is, what is their want or need? And can we be empathic with them and let them be heard, create space for them? And in the end, that's actually all any of us really wants, right, is to be seen and heard, right? So I think that's such an important part from a business perspective of what the be ready might stand for too, right? It's this settled presence using our senses to be with another.
I think it's interesting that the words you just used to be heard, to be seen and heard. I'd push it a little bit further, to be known, right? To truly be known, right? And I think that's a real challenge for folks. Um, when you're talking professionally too about you want your accomplishments and what your obstacles have been, going back to something that you had talked about earlier, Matt, what your obstacle have been, what you've transcended. You want to be known that you've conquered things, you've reached a level of achievement, and it hasn't been easy.
Yeah. And I think when we let the others around us tell their story of that, then they feel connected to us. So we are not selling, we're listening. We're connecting, right? And then if I can meet your need because, oh, I hear that struggle, you know what? We have something that might fit that need, right? I'm not trying to be transactional here and jam something that I have down your throat. I actually want to know, what do you want? Am I going to fit that need? And you know what? This is a big part, I think, of also the appreciating that we don't know it all. And maybe we don't have all of the answers. And maybe even our product is not the right one. But you know what? I do know the person down the street, and I'm happy to refer you to them, because now you know what happens the next time that they do have a need that you might have. Joel, hey buddy, I love the way you guided us into that. I love that you prioritized me and not you in that moment. Can we do, I've got a bigger project I've actually been brewing on. Can we do that one? You know, it's so fascinating of how, you know, this more relational versus transactional type piece works as well from a business perspective.
Yeah, and then I think it sort of got to build on this. You know, there's a whole story about requalifying, qualifying or requalifying. You know, it also sort of, we talk a lot, you know, in what we do at LA about different terms sometimes, but essentially about self-esteem. You know, and then sort of, you know, when you understand that, I'll give you an example. You know, I had I'm pitching a project now to a company, you know, and I had this moment where I sort of needed to qualify or requalify you, if you will, you know, to somebody from a new company. You know, but then I'm sitting there, I'm speaking with a person, you know, who's essentially, we've gotten into some sort of a report, and he's sort of telling me a story about how they've, you know, effed up their business in Oceania, and it cost them $1 billion. You know, and I'm thinking, okay, so we're sitting here and we're discussing as peers. I mean, I'm happy to sort of to show off my skill to you because you don't know me. I do not take this as criticism. You know, it's just so that you understand we are peers. You know, so this is actually very, if you consider it from that point, not as something that is sort of aiming at your self-esteem, you know, and trying to hurt it, but rather it's you're essentially communicating. You know, so it sheds an entirely different light on it entirely.
It's I mean, I really loved also when I joined. I decided to learn tennis. Simas right away said, "Okay, you need to practice with coach. You need to practice on your own, and you need to compete." And then, like, what is my level? Like, how can I qualify to what kind of competitions? And then when I enter every single time competition, it's always qualifying not only, okay, what is my overall level, but what my level is today. And then how I feel and what I can produce with that, what I'm having today in and this is where I think so this qualification and then competing with these egos becomes when we focus on, okay, our worth instead of what we're trying here together to create. Is it the experience of growth, that competition where we excel together? Or is it like, look at me and my West, or like how beautiful I am, and then look at you, how beautiful you are. But no, like what's the point for us meeting here together? It's not like competing against each other. It's competing with, competing for the value what we're creating, and then having that it's hard to have that kind of mindset, and we need to be ready what we may, and this is what I also talk with my clients, what there will be points in our conversations when we will be competing with ideas. No, you are right. No, I am right. No, I'm right. And this is the point where we need to stop. When we start defensive or offensive with certain ideas, that's the point to stop, because we went into wrong direction to go against something instead of recalibrating to, okay, we have these three different opinions. How and where they come together, what we need to let go and what we need to embrace. So last point for you to close this conversation.
Yeah, well, I think it's actually, you just threw up a softball, because I think this is the beautiful thing and why I love this call right here, and that it's multicultural. Because only then can I expand my own understanding and knowledge of the world. Right? My worldview is this big, right? I need all of you with your different perspectives and worldviews to round me out, right? Just because, you know, I was born here and lived in the US and blah, 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 blah. Sure, that's my existence, and maybe that fit my environment, but I hope to go out and explore and coach with people who have varied backgrounds and experiences, right? And that rounds me out. And then I can share maybe that experience with someone else like me of like, hey, you know, there's this other thing, right? There's this other culture and mindset and understanding that might actually suit you in this case that you haven't even understood or thought of or experienced before. Right. So
I'm glad you're saying this Matt, this is one of the great things about this experience for me is so many of the things I experienced professionally um, that oftentimes were the most frustrating things I characterize as uniquely American, right?
Yeah,
And then I started
yeah,
having all these other conversations. I discovered it's uniquely human,
yeah,
right?
yes.
And so that's been really cool. And
Yeah, yeah, and I
I
think
think
there's
as this
sometimes
community grows and has dimensions to it
yeah,
of what you're talking about is
right.
really incredible.
Right. I think there's different solves for, right? Yes, we are all human and driven by much of the same things, yet there's a different solve for these different things that I don't have that Inga has, right? Or that Joe has. And I think this is the beauty of honestly what you're doing through this project, right? And what you're doing here, right? It's such a multifaceted, multicultural, multi-envision, it's not an echo chamber. I love the fact that you are it's a diverse and integrated program, and I think that's what it takes to do something worthwhile and great, and it's not done very often and thought of in that way.
So much everyone for joining, for your questions, for your openness to this strong ideas, what Matt is encouraging with beautiful work what he's doing in coaching, but also in building tools for all of us to reinforce, remind, and not to be distracted by this fluff. but
Yeah.
to truly keep learning the core aspects. But I really love how you expressed, Joel, this humanness in us, like we can rediscover, where we can rehabilitate that high performance in that humanness of our multi-asset beautiful world what we're living in. Thank you. More beautiful guests to come almost every month now. I am creating the advertising for that. Matt, you're always welcome to join as a guest or as a participant or as a listener. It's true honor. Thank you so much for your time. We are so lucky to have you here.
Thank you for creating this environment. It was a pleasure to join you all for a bit and keep on cooking. I'll be watching.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you,
So my
everyone.
expectations has been set high, by everything has shared, but I can summarize that I've been converted in any case,
Yeah, thanks
That
you.
has that power.